I did grow up in the projects. At that time, I didn't really know what the projects was. It just seemed normal to me. It was affordable housing. At that time, I was very curious. We moved out of the projects when I was 2, but the 2 memories that I have of the projects is I used to walk around and wonder and just look at people, hi, how are you? Hi. And my mother had trouble keeping up with me. They used to have to make sure they kept the door locked because I would get out the door and just go walk and just talk to people. And then the other memory I remember, there was a dog. He was so pretty. He was a German Shepherd. His owner had tied him up to a gate, and I just kept looking at the dog. And my mother and I had just came from Soulard Market, and we were walking back with our groceries. And I said, I want to touch him. She said, don't touch that dog. So as soon as she went in the house and put the groceries up, I went out with my curious self, and I pet the dog. So curiosity almost killed this cat. And I might not have been here today, but the dog, he bit me. I remember that vague. I remember like it happened before today. I was laying on the ground. He bit me, pulled my underwear down, and bit me on my bottom. So I remember my dad was on the phone trying to find this dog because they were talking about giving me rabies shots and all of these other things because they didn't know where the dog came from. So my dad even flew to Chicago. He asked the different neighbors, who is this guy? Where does he live? And he went and he found, and luckily I didn't have to get any rabies shots. But going back to that curiosity, that's what led me into teaching. We moved out of the projects when I was 2, and my siblings, I was always the experiment person. So they would always put me up to, Van, you do this, you won't get in trouble, you're the only girl. So I did that a lot. I was always the guinea pig, and I was always the one, if they would say, tell mom and dad you did this because they won't whoop you because you're the only girl. So I took a lot of blows for them. They would give me all for a piece of candy, some now-laters. And so when I went to school, the teachers always said, Vanessa's a good student, but she talks too much. I would be through with my work early, and I would sit there and I would start talking to my neighbors, and I would try to talk to the teachers, and the teacher was trying to get me out of their face. Well, you need to go tutor. So I started tutoring my friends. When I got to high school, a whole lot of things changed. Puberty kicked in. I was a tomboy because of my brothers. 6 brothers, they said they wasn't going to have a sissy sister. So they sometimes my dad trained them and had them go into boxing. So they taught me how to box. And we had boxing gloves, and my dad would just, in the neighborhood, he would say, if you're going to fight, you're going to have a fair fight. And he said, you know, we're not going, once it's over with, that's it. So my brothers, good thinking, decided that we're going to pay. You're going to pay to have my sister beat you up. So I would fight. I would have the boxing gloves on, and they would say, right jab, uppercut. And people were just astonished that I knew how to fight like that. And no one looking at me now believes that I was that tomboy fighting with boxing gloves and in the ring bouncing around like Muhammad Ali. So when that puberty came in, my mom tried to talk to me about the birds and the bees. I said, I don't want to hear it because I will my body not to grow up. I am in control of this body, and nothing is going to change it. And the thing that I really liked, that she did try to have the talk with me, because she said, I'm not going to have you learning the street names. I want you to learn from the books. So she had a book with pictures, and I'm sitting here looking at the book with the pictures, sitting me down, trying to describe it. I said, that's not going to happen to me. And she said, you need to listen to me. So if I don't know how many of you all remember sitting in a chair and your mom is curling your hair and press. So every time I got in the chair, she had a book, and we had a conversation till I tried to avoid that conversation. And then when my body started changing, I was just, no, this is not real. I'm supposed to be like them. And I couldn't believe that I was changing. And so because I was so tomboyish and puberty was hitting, and you have a lot of questions and you don't know what to do, I found solace in books. So I started reading books. But then puberty kicked in again. The first person I dated, I married. And so I had my first daughter at 20. I had my second daughter at 21. I decided to stop then because I was recycling that poverty process. So I didn't work. My ex-husband, I'm going ahead. He didn't work. He worked as a cook, so that was not stable. He worked at like Sheraton Hotel, so he would be in and out of work. So I started selling Mary Kay. I sold pies. I cooked. I babysit other kids just to bring in some extra income. And then when my children started going to daycare, when I finally got a job, they went to daycare, and I started volunteering because I knew they were spoiled because they had been home with me for 2 years. And here going back to work, I had guilt written all over my face. So I started volunteering every time I had a day off work. And so the director said, why don't you go back to school and be a teacher? And I said, I hadn't thought about that. So the more I did that, I went back to school to be a teacher, and I was fortunate enough to work at a daycare, which allowed me to go to school during the day because some of my classes were during the day. And she was flexible enough to let me work my hours around my schooling. When I went back to school at 26, I looked around the college. Everybody was chewing bubble gum, and they was silly, and I'm saying, what in the world? And I'm here with my books. I didn't have that much money at that time, so my book bag was plastic grocery bags. So I had the plastic grocery bags, had my books in them. When the bags tore up, I went back to the grocery store and got another bag. And I didn't see anything wrong with that because that was my reality at that time. My mom went back, she and I both went to Harris Stowe Teachers College, and our dream was to open up a daycare. So she took classes in the daytime, I took classes at night, and I used her books. So she would leave her books on the table in the hallway, and I would go by her house, pick the books up, and I would go to school, and then I would bring them back so that she could have them in the morning. And so we went to school. I started off in below basic classes. Because I had been out of school for such a long time, I felt insecure. I felt that the younger students knew more than me. I'm coming in, I have 2 young kids. They just graduated from high school. And so they had, to me, the youthfulness kind of intimidated me. But the long story short, I ended up being a tutor at Harris Stowe for the classes that were tutoring me. So I ended up earning a lot of the awards that they had because I took my education seriously at that point, because my goal was, in my head I was thinking, the better grades I get, the better job I'm going to get. So I graduated at 33, summa cum laude, 3rd ranking student out of I think 300 students. The good thing about that is it wasn't that many African Americans in it, and they kept saying, who is Howard? Howard must have cheated. Howard. And I was like, what did the professor say? They said Howard has the highest grade point average in my science class. That was one of my weak spots, because in the back of your head you still have those naysayers, the things that you heard as a child. You can't do this and you can't do that. But I kept reaching out with faith and hope that things could be better for my children, and they were my motivation to do better. My kids even went to school with me. I would pick them up from school. The lady in the bookstore would give them candy. Sometimes I didn't have money to feed them. They would give them food for me. And every year they would ask my children, what grade are you in now? We're sophomore. What grade are you in? We're a junior. What grade? We're graduating this year. So when I graduated, it was like a weight was lifted, but I busted out crying in the classroom because I didn't know what was the next step. Then I was like, well, I graduated, now what? Am I going to get a job? At that time, I think the teacher market had started slowing down. It was 1998. But I was fortunate enough that I had such a good reputation at Harris that they asked for a student who was highly recommended to come for an interview, and I got that first teaching position. And that was in the inner city in St. Louis. That was my training ground. I really didn't want to leave, but I too wanted to do better for my kids, so I moved out of the city and moved in the county. And so I transferred my students, my children, to a better school district. I researched the school district and I said I want my kids to have things that I did not have so that I could break this cycle. And so they went to another school district. I ended up going to Ferguson Florissant School District. While there, I was a kindergarten teacher, and some of the parents would say, you treat teaching this like it's a boot camp. You got my kids standing in line. Kindergarten is about playing. So I had to show them the curriculum. These are all the things I need to teach in kindergarten, and I need to get them there. I had to change the mindset of my parents who thought that school was about playing, they didn't have to do homework. I had to hold the students accountable, I had to hold the parents accountable, and I had to change their thinking set when it came to school. So from there, I went into reading, and I started working with the lowest kids. And I had a firm belief that once you came into my classroom, once you came to me, you would never leave the same way that you came. You were going to be better. And that belief alone helped my students. I told them, you were selected for my class. I picked you. You were in here because I want you, and I'm going to help you do better. Some of the teachers felt like going to reading, that's bad. That's a bad stigma. Some of the kids would come in with attitudes. So I had to win them over. The thing that was kind of life-changing, and it kind of bothered me a little bit, was my first class. I took pictures of my family, and I put them up, and I showed them. I said, this is my daughters. This is my house. This is me as a child. And I just gave them some background information, because kids won't let you teach them unless you make an attachment, an emotional connection. So I tried to make that emotional connection and that attachment to make myself real. I'm not just a teacher, I have children too. So the first question somebody asked me, do your children have the same name? And then they went from there to, me and my brother and sister got different daddies. I got a new uncle this week. That broke my heart, because there was a revolving door with families, and it helped me see that I was in a non-traditional school setting, and I had to reach those kids, and I couldn't give up on them. And so, long story short with that, my reading students started outscoring the kids who were not in reading. And the teachers would ask me, what are you doing? I said, we're just reading. I said, it's just like exercising. The more you read, the better you get. The more you read, the better you'll spell. There's a reciprocity with reading and writing, and we got to hook them in. I did it non-traditionally. I surveyed the kids, so I purchased magazines on motorcycles. I purchased Jet. I purchased modeling books, whatever they had an interest in. I would purchase those magazines and different books, and I would let them come in, and I would let them read on their break. Sometimes if they had a test, I would let them come in and study, because I wanted them to know things, and I wanted them to feel success in school. And what I started doing was pre-teaching what they were getting in the classroom so that they could participate in classroom discussions. So then the teachers was like, so-and-so is really improving. They're saying such and such and such. They added to the conversation, started saying that writing was improving. And then from there, I became a reading coach, where I was over the reading in the buildings, because I began to specialize in that. And I could come up with a lot of tricks of the trade. And we all have those. A lot of times you just put them on a shelf. You never know when you're going to need that teaching strategy or when you're going to need that teaching tool, and you have to pull it out at the right time. And like I try to tell the teachers, amoxicillin, sometimes you overuse it, it does not work. And it's the same thing with the teaching strategy. If you overuse it constantly and don't provide a variety, then you cannot get a cure. You just get the same problem that's stemmed or seeped into a different area. So I always try to include what's important to the students. And as we face in Common Core, you have to think about 21st century learning. 21st century learning is showing the kids a connection of what you're doing in school, you can use outside of school. So once they get a chance to make those connections, you're in the house. So after I did the reading, the reading fund left. So then they placed me back in the classroom. And so some of my colleagues at that time said, Vanessa's in the classroom. Teach me how to teach, Vanessa. It hurt my heart, but it didn't stop me. So I had determined, I said, I'm going to show you everything that I've been telling you works, it works. So I started cooperative grouping in my classroom. They didn't believe third graders could do that. I had a writing center. My kids rotated around the room. I had them on an honor system. I changed behaviors because I believed in them. I had expectations here, and they met them every time. And so my first year back in the classroom, I was kind of overwhelmed because they threw a whole lot of things at me. This curriculum, that curriculum. So I'm trying to play catch up. So I knew reading. So guess what I taught all day? I taught reading. So after that, I learned how to prepare ahead of time, which takes time. So I came in that summer. I got my things together. I knew that curriculum backwards and forwards. Nobody paid me for this. This was something that I wanted to do because I said I cheated my first class students by not giving them everything that they needed. They did well, but they could have done better if I was a little bit more prepared. And I promised myself that I wouldn't do that. And then my children were in school, and I had a couple teachers that dropped the ball on them. So they kind of gotten behind. So that put a little fire up under me because